Well, hello guys. This is Katie with Vintage and Vinyl back with another duo dive. And of course, I've got my trusty sidekick, Patrick from Trusty Huckster Mercantile. And
Hello.
tonight we are taking a dive into his collection of Stouffer and Pickard all over gold, which I'm very excited about. This will be fascinating. It's something that actually I see a lot of here. And I'm looking forward to learning more about it because I don't have a collection of it myself, but I always think it's so beautiful. So, welcome, Patrick. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, no, thanks. I'm looking forward to doing I love doing our duo dives, and every once in a while, you and I get to duo dive each other, looking at our different collections. And this, as much as I love doing the triptychs and the deeper dives, sometimes what we're going to talk about, what I'm going to show is just a duo dive topic. I love this collection. I have to admit, I did a lot of research specifically for tonight, so I was a little bit more educated for it. Because it's just one of those, it is what it is. And it's kind of letting people know there's differences between the types of gold, the manufacturers, what it was all about. And so I'm, looking forward to sharing that. So I'm pulling up a picture. I posted this on Instagram. This is part of my collection. So this is, this
Gosh,
is
that's
a
gorgeous.
I've got a 1930s radio cabinet, and this is sitting on top of it. So here in the corner, I've got three vases I'll be talking about. There's an oval platter, the shell dish, and then this handled piece there. All of those will be shown tonight. But so when people are asking, well, wait a minute, what's all over gold? This is all over gold. So, and it is different from weeping gold. So we may talk about that at some point as well. But that's what we're going to talk about. So who do we got in the chat tonight?
We got lots of folks joining us. Already 17 people here, which
Oh,
is
great.
amazing. Linda Barnum's tuning in from Michigan. So, welcome, Linda. Peterson is here with her fabulous emojis in the chat. Nate is coming in from New Zealand. Hello, Mr. Nate. Brian Hance from the Chicagoland area. And yes, happy Thanksgiving Eve to everybody. I appreciate all of you tuning in. I know that there's probably a lot of craziness going on in everyone's houses right now, getting ready for the
At least
big
we're home. We're watching this. You're not all at the grocery store trying to fill up and pistol whip people for the last of the marshmallows or whatever people need to grab.
I was at the grocery store earlier today and it was a complete madhouse. I wanted to get out of there. I had to grab one thing for my collaboration with Jamie. I just needed like one or two things.
That's the worst.
And there was already a line of people all stressed out, carts piled to the hilt. Of course, what's hilarious was the lady that was behind me. She just had one box of stovetop stuffing. I'm like, yep, you're my favorite person now at the grocery store.
I had to run out really quick today, and I was driving, and all of a sudden there was a lot of traffic, which I wasn't overly surprised about that just in general. But then I realized it was all concentrated in the left lane of the road that I was on. And I'm like, why are so many people trying to turn left? And I didn't need to go there. So I did. I passed them all, and I was trying to figure out what it was. And it was everyone trying to get into the Costco. The Costco was completely, the parking lot was completely filled, and people were trying to get in. And I'm like, okay, if you need to go get your Thanksgiving, don't go to Costco. That's where you just go, you know what, I'm going to Trader Joe's because it can only be so busy. At some point, I do not want to do the full-fledged shopping.
Yeah, it was absolutely a zoo. And I live across from a mall. So everyone was out Christmas shopping and with their families and doing Thanksgiving. And I'm like, whoa, I'm so excited to be home.
I did put up some of my Christmas decorations.
It looks beautiful, Patrick.
Yeah, those are my favorite Christmas decorations every year is when I decorate the top of the piano. So got that done, got the tree up, and the tree is decorated. My daughter is home for break, and so she came back today and spent some time with me, and we got some Christmas stuff decorated up and running. But of course, I wouldn't let her touch this. I'm like, nope, this is mine. Doing this my way.
Well, the tree is going to be beautiful, Patrick, when you get some pictures of that. I'm glad you got to spend some time with your daughter. That's wonderful.
Yes.
Amy B is tuning in, so welcome, Amy. Dawn is here. Hello, welcome, Dawn. Hope all the doggies are doing well. Let's see. Bren is tuning in from Hawaii. Hello, Bren. And there's Louie into something probably she's not supposed to be.
Look, Mom's distracted. I get to play.
That's right. I can eat everything in the house. Quick, chew the pillows. Chad is here. Welcome, Chad. Thank you so much for tuning in. Carrie is here. Carrie always has the most hilarious names for Nate. I think that's funny. I always look for that. Katie is tuning in. Another Katie in the house. Cheryl Ross is here. Thank you, Cheryl. And Delbert, proud American, thank you so much for your comment. Yes, I really am enjoying wearing the gold accents for tonight's duo dive. So I've got my favorite little pin here from Pamela Blanchard with my gold on my hat band, and that's really fun. Melinda's tuning in from Lavish Mango. She left us a very detailed comment about milk, so always learning new things here in our community. Let's see, Maria Empty Nesting is tuning in. Lots of other folks' chat is going by very fast. Lots of hellos to everyone, and Vinny is here. So thanks, guys, so much for tuning in. And I'm sorry if I missed you. Oh, Sheila Putman is here from Mimi's Treasure Shop. So welcome, Sheila. Thank you so much for being here tonight. So we are going to kick things off, and I'm so excited to learn about Patrick's collection. So let's start off by having you tell us a little bit about what is Stouffer and Pickard.
Okay, so the collection really and you see a little piece of it sticking out in the corner. So that is actually a wayward piece that I am not kidding. About 20 minutes ago, I properly identified for the first time with the help of my daughter. And it is a Osborne piece, so that may be destroyed later. But no. So that's which one of these is not like the other? That's the no man's land back here in the corner. But it is a good example of another, and it's a beautiful piece of all over gold. And the collection started. See, there's problems with the lights trying not to glare too much, but you can see there's a detailed etched pattern. You can kind of see in the rim. You can see the daisies and the roses. It has a beautiful pattern name of daisies and roses. But then you've also got a floral basket etched into the middle. And the concept behind, or not even concept, but the idea behind this is it was popular in like kind of going into the Deco era. So it kind of started getting popularized by Pickard. They claim they invented it, and I have not found anything that could actually substantiate that claim. But some of what they started in 1910 was they started doing gold etching on their hand-painted porcelain plates. So this one is one of the oldest pieces of Pickard porcelain that I have. And you can see it's got some great gold accents to it. And this is what they introduced in 1910. It's an encrusted gold, burnished gold. It's hand-painted, hand-applied. And they kind of started perfecting that until 1912 when they introduced the concept of all over gold. And I'll show a couple of variations on that. But what I thought was fun about this one, if you follow my channel at all, I love porcelain just in general. And so one of the things that I do, oh, thank you, Katie. One of the things that I do collect or I do like is porcelain, and I like it all and I can't have it all. So I try and figure out what is the best accents to what I've got. And I happen to have in my living room a burgundy accented wall. Everyone says, accent walls are old hat or they're not popular anymore. Well, bite me. I like my burgundy wall, and gold looks great against it.
It does.
So I found, unfortunately, I don't remember which was my first piece. I should, but I don't. And I don't display the creamers, but there's a couple of examples I'm going to show that these showcase very nicely. But it looks really good against the burgundy wall. And actually that one picture that I showed is against that wall. So you can see all of that gold with the wood tone. I mean, I still like the dark wood against that burgundy with that gold. I just love the looks of it. And so I kind of started this collection somewhat accidentally, somewhat, I kind of liked it. And then I kind of, just like I do with a lot of my stuff, as I started getting pieces, I started researching it and trying to figure out, well, wait a minute, what is all of this stuff? So the gold accent, a lot of this I'm learning from this book. For anyone who is interested in hand-painted porcelain in general, but this does have a section of all over gold from Pickard, plus some other companies. And I'll talk about the other companies that are in here too. It's a great primer for Pickard, and Pickard is a Chicago-based company. So sometimes there's a reason I want to collect a certain company, and that was kind of my attraction to Pickard. It was they did not manufacture porcelain. What they did, and this is a good example of it, what they did was they bought porcelain from abroad. They bought blanks. That was a fairly common practice. And then they decorated it. So they bought the porcelain that was just white. Then they painted it. Now, what's fun about this is the oldest piece I have. And you can see there's this, it's like a maple leaf style pattern. which is sitting next to the Bavarian porcelain the original label. And what they did from around I have notes on this, from 1912 to 1918 is when this mark was being used. That's why I love porcelain, because it's great to date it.
Yeah, I love the marks. It makes it so easy.
And when they designed this, originally it was a square, it was a gold square with the little stamp on it with their name, W.A. Pickard, hand painted China. The square was trying to cover up the marks that were coming from the other companies. What they realized is that the other companies, the European, whether it's French, Limoges, Austrian, wherever they were getting the porcelain from, sometimes the marks were too big. So they moved to this shape because it covered more ground. And if there was a piece of porcelain that the manufacturer's label was too big, the painters actually had the ability to make the maple leaf bigger. And their whole sole purpose was to cover and obliterate any reference to the original manufacturer.
Wow.
In 1916, the U.S. Customs Office stepped in and said, no. The whole reason these things are marked is so we can know where they're coming from. Stop it. So in 1916 to 1918, the maple leaf was next to the original. And then they just stopped doing it because they didn't need something this big with an opaque background if you weren't going to obliterate the original. So where they got their porcelain seemed to change. This one was... what was this one? Gene and Company? No, Jaeger and Company. J and C, that was from Bavaria. And then you can also use their marks. The J and C mark was from 1898 to 1923. But you know that the maple leaf next to the J and C mark was only used for 2 years. So this plate was from 1916 to 1918. I love porcelain because it's manufactured and I can know exactly when it came from. So that's the oldest piece. And like I said, so around they started doing that in 1910. In 1912 is when they started introducing an all over gold pattern. Most of my all over golds, there's not a lot of, I don't have a lot of really old marks on those. The oldest I've got is the salt shaker. So it's a little salt shaker. This is one of this is the oldest mark that I have. And this is one of the oldest all over gold patterns they made. And it's simply called encrusted because there's no pattern on this. So you can see it's got kind of the darkness and the lightness, but there's no flowers, there's no vines. It's literally just kind of like a skin that has been done onto the gold. And the mark, because the piece is so small, it has Picard in kind of a little trapezoid. And that mark was used only from 1918 to 1919. So this is the oldest salt shaker I've got with the encrusted. But what became most common and was most popular, and most of the pieces I have were when they started doing the actual designs. And this one, if you just spend 5 seconds looking at it, you can probably name the pattern. It's roses and daisies or daisies and roses. It's not very creative. You simply have a series of roses and a series of daisies all in a ground that is basically all the way around this piece. So I've got that one is all over daisy. This one is all over daisy. This one is all over daisy. As the pieces get later, you can see there's some differences in the depth of the etching. Mm-hmm. So this one is almost very shallow and there's no darkness. There's no depth to this. It's a much more modern piece because they did continue to make this. And Picard is still existence. You can still buy Picard China. They still have a wedding registry that you can register to get your wedding china from them, and they will post it on their website saying that you're getting married and this is the wedding pattern that you want. So
speaking of that, what kind of market did they have for this china back in the teens and 20s?
They primarily sold through large department stores. So like they were based in Chicago, so Marshall Fields was a big one, but they did sell nationally. So this should show up, in vintage and antique stores and possibly thrift stores around the country, because it was completely distributed, and it was for the home market. This really was an item that was relatively inexpensive to produce. It was not for the everyman, because it was fairly glitzy, but it wasn't super high end china that only the wealthy would be able to get it, because these were created in, it's hard to say mass productions, but they were in productions. Like this was molded, painted, the etch was mechanized. It's something that this is not a rare piece. So it's simply a matter of finding pieces that are stamped. If you want to find a certain age, I like to find the older stamps. And I want to have the older stamps, and I want to have a collection of the actual different types of etchings that they offered. I want to kind of mix it up, because not by design, but over half of the patterns that I have in my collection are all rose and daisy. And
is that one of their most common patterns, Patrick?
Yes. They invented it. They did invent this. And what was interesting is, I'm going to jump a little bit to Stouffer. Stouffer was another manufacturer in Chicago. Again, nobody manufactured their own porcelain. Actually, they did do a little bit of that, but a lot of what we're talking about for the all over gold, in most cases, they were importing those blanks. When Stouffer started creating patterns, this is one of my Stouffer pieces. It has its Stouffer fine china mark. They also created a rose and daisy pattern. So this became so ubiquitous that there's actually a reference in the Picard book that virtually every other company that manufactured all over gold, and AOG is abbreviation for that. So if you ever see AOG, all over gold. So every porcelain manufacturer that decorated, these were considered porcelain decorators or china decorators. They created a pattern that was basically identical to this. So even though this had been a registered patent or trademark for how it was done, they basically did something that at a glance, they look exactly the same. So
now, is that little dish considered a nappy, Patrick?
I would say it is. I think it's because it's elongated. I'm not 100% sure, but yes, I would still consider it like a lemon wedge server, just a little nappy dish. And this one is like most of them. The bottoms are not going to be encrusted because they were still showing the bottoms, but this one got entirely covered. And so it's one of those cases that it makes it harder to recognize who made these pieces. This was a rose and daisy pattern, but so many companies made it. I can't swear that this is Picard, because if you look at it, you also see there's a band that runs this double band here that runs all the way around. So that was part of the design. I can't find anything else that has that. So this might be another company, but they obliterated their patterns. There may have been a paper label on it at one point, but they completely covered it. And one of the things that was popular about this, and again, why this wasn't always the highest level of product, is particularly as this started going through World War I. In some cases, they lasted through World War II. It was difficult to find quality blanks. This coating is so heavy, the gold, it actually could fill in flaws in the porcelain. So in some cases, it was completely placed on purpose, because the actual piece may have not have been a very high quality piece. And so they were actually making it a better, not necessarily, I don't know about stronger, but a more uniform piece. So then when they did the etching, it was completely smooth all the way across. So that was just something a lot of those companies were doing.
And was it cheaper to get a less inexpensive porcelain, so that, if they were manufacturing this, they would obviously probably get the cheaper porcelain and then just paint over it with
right. So what they could do, because you figure, this kept going, even while they were doing all over gold. So they could order the blanks from, what was this one? From Bavaria. They could get an entire crate or whatever, however they were shipped at the time. And when they went through them, the blanks, some of them may have been perfect. Well, that's what would have been used for the dinnerware. And some of them may have been slightly flawed. Whether they knew they were flawed or something happened to them in transit, they'd be like, okay, you know what? I can't put a beautiful, cream colored porcelain dinner service because there's going to be a big chink in it or a big, a slip crack, but you can cover it, with this. So in some cases, they just diversified what they were making to use as much of what they had, because a lot of these companies did survive into the Depression. Past the Depression, only 8 survived this type of manufacturing. Picard and Stouffer were 2 of them.
And I wonder why they survived versus other companies. Was that just because they were more well known at the time?
Well, one of the things, at least with Stouffer, and I don't know if I marked that in the book, one of the things that Stouffer really focused on, they really were focusing on the wholesale market. So they had always were working with relatively low profit margins. And so they could continue selling because they were not trying to sell to the end user. So it still they took a hit, but they still had a customer base. Where Picard did struggle a little bit more, because they were trying to sell into those high-end department stores that were selling dinnerware. Well, who was buying a dinner service of 50 for 12 in the middle of the Depression?
Yeah.
So they're definitely, they did take some hits, but one of the things, Picard did manufacture their own porcelain as well. Some of their oldest pieces the clay came from Ohio, and then it became too expensive to ship, so they started getting clay from Edgerton, Wisconsin. So some of the oldest Picard pieces actually say Edgerton. And that's something I'm still on the lookout for my collection, is if I can find some pieces. They wouldn't be all over gold because they didn't do it during that same era. But again, just like this one, the idea of having those older back stamps, I just think is cool. And I think Picard is extremely high quality. I think it's beautifully done. And this book is just, I'll just sit there and read it before I go to bed, because some of the images in this are just
total eye candy.
Absolutely. I mean, they just did a little bit of everything, and they still exist. So they've been around since 1894 is technically when Picard took the name. But Mr. Picard used to sell for Pauline Pottery. And so there's actually some stuff that's older that goes back to 1882. And so because they were around for so long, they've got deco stuff. They have tons of nouveau. They did a lot of ads, some really cool ads, of all the different types. And they just diversified so much that they were able to withstand the test of time. They even did some things that looked like Rookwood, from when we talked about that, Moorcroft. They were definitely getting their inspirations from porcelain painting from around the country and around the world. So there's just some beautiful pieces that did help them survive. So all over gold, Picard, hopefully someday we'll do a triptych on it, because I think as a full company, there's a lot more there. But for the all over gold aspect of it, it really was popular from around, into the late teens, into the 20s. It did survive into World War II, but it wasn't as common. But they did continue to make it because people still liked it. It just wasn't, the fashions changed. So as you got into World War II, it wasn't as flashy, and it was 22 karat gold. It wasn't as flashy. People weren't looking for that as much.
Now, I'm curious about the plates, because I would imagine that you find a lot of those with damage due to the fact that they're hand painted and they've got the gold overlay. So really when you find those are the values, because obviously it would matter being in mint condition for higher values.
A lot of it, because this is not necessarily there is the idea of the grand millennial, the younger people that are, looking at decorating the style of their grandmother. So I hate that term, but the grand millennial, the cottage chic. There are some people that will still like this, but this is not mid-century modern. This is not boho. This is still, because of this design. This, I think I picked up for probably $5. They're not going to go for big bucks. It's when you get into, I took a couple pictures of things that kind of cross into a different category. There is a pattern that I've never seen live. First, I'll show you the etch. So that's a floral scroll. So this is the Rose and Daisy. This is like a black and white reproduction from the book. That's what that pattern looks like that I was showing on a lot of their pieces. So that's very, very common. What is not common is this one.
Ooh, that's gorgeous.
It's called Planets. And so you just take a look. I mean, you can tell this would not have been something that was used for an Art Nouveau styled painting. This was all deco. And so there is a very cool piece that's in the book that they
Oh
painted.
my gosh.
And then you can see the planets is the etch on the bottom. So this is what they did with a lot of them, is that they kind of did the all over gold, but then they still had to paint, they still had something else painted onto it to make it a little bit more diverse. Like, I would love to come across something like this.
That would probably be your holy grail, right,
Yeah,
Pat?
isn't this like freaking awesome? I mean,
It's
this is all over
amazing.
gold at the top. It's got the chevron pattern. I can't remember what that one's called, but it's a different style. But you've then had the bottom half is ebony black, and then the colors on that it's just beautiful. So
look at the handles too.
Yeah, so you got the shape of the piece, like, so that shape would have been done in all types of designs. Like, there would have been other types of all over golds, there could have been other types of painting, there could have been florals. So this is just a really striking example. I've never come across the gold and the black together in the wild. So like that would be one of those kind of like, the holy grail ideas that I would make room in my decor for something like that because it's just such a cool image. Let's see, I'm trying to think some of the other ones. So the one with the planets, that was made from 1925 to 1930. So it was like
very short run
in that deco era. And it's a very short run, and it was a very distinct look that would have been very high end, very New York urban, cutting edge. But there's not gonna be a lot of those out there because they literally weren't made for very long. So like some of the, and I took a lot of these from the patterns. These are all silk. This is silk moire. These are all over gold designs. And so they were used different ways. Like this was typically used as a background to then paint something on top of it. That's the wrong way. So you've got, that's the rose and daisy. This one is the rose garden. So this one has a little bit more of a vine design. This one is the trailing vine, and I actually have that one. So that's this.
Oh, that's just lovely.
So it's a much more open design. I hate that I have it on a creamer. I don't display creamers in my living room. So this usually sits in a box. So this is not something that's even on display, but I love the etch.
And so it's I love the shape of that.
Yeah, it is. It's a very sexy shape for a creamer, because I did have that other one is more the helmet shape that's more traditional. So this is a little bit squattier version of it.
And the handle.
Yes, I just like, how sexy is that handle?
Extremely.
And so you've just got, this is a beautiful pattern. Again, this is the rose and the daisy, again, very, very common. But this is a paneled design. So you can see there's just burnished gold in between. And then they just did the etch on the panel. So there's just some really cool, really cool. I see one of the questions coming from Melinda. It's just to me, creamers belong in the kitchen. So for me, this is in my living room. I'm collecting the vases. I'm like, my favorite piece, it's still in the basic pattern, but my favorite is this oval tray.
That is absolutely stunning and classic and timeless.
Absolutely. And so this one, it's an oval. I had it. That was in the picture. I have it done. I actually have a round item sitting on it. So you really don't lose the benefit of the fact it's an oval, but it's low profile. It looks great. And this is a really good example too, for what they were doing. The stamps changed in 1938. No, wait a minute. This one's older. So this is one of my older pieces. So this is also the rose and daisy. This one is from 1930 to 1938. But if you look really closely, you can see that there's a line that's going through it that's missing. This was a second. So this was a factory second that they still went ahead and sold. I don't see anything wrong with it. So to my eyes, this seems fine, but there's something with the way this etch was done that either it's not uniform along the edges, it wasn't uniformly crossed across the piece. I have no idea what the flaw is, but they did that very, very distinctly so that people would know that these were seconds. It's not uncommon. Hager did the same thing. The problem with Hager, who's also a local manufacturer, they put a sticker on it saying it was a second.
Oh,
What is a unscrupulous reseller going to do? They're going to remove that sticker. And so this, if you know it's Picard, you know it's a Picard second. Didn't make this any less desirable, but technically this would be worth less than one that was not a second, that did not have that marked out logo. So this, but I even though it's the common pattern, I still think it's beautiful. I also don't put my salt and pepper shakers on it on display, but again, I think this is
those are gorgeous.
It's just considered encrusted because there's no pattern. This is one of the first designs they made. I still think that's really cool.
And is that 22 or 24 karat gold?
I was trying to find, these are not marked. None of these were marked. I was trying to find a reference in the book of what they were. I believe they were 24, but I can't find any reference to that. So I couldn't swear to you on what that is in either the Stouffer or the Pickard. One of the things that both companies did, and I don't have as many examples of it, this kind of has it, but it's like I mentioned it, you've got the paneled etching, and then you've got the burnished gold, which is just a solid gold, and then burnished gold solid in the middle, because why would you etch the middle of a creamer? But I've got a better example from Stouffer, which, first of all, is just one of my favorite shapes. These
that is amazing.
Are gorgeous. And you can see what they did on this one is they did a poppy etch on the panels on the outside. That's their poppy etch, and it's scaled to match. That's the other thing I like about what Stouffer did. They scaled them in size so that you didn't have just a lot of little patterns. You had nice big ones. But then on the inside, it's encrusted. So this one is a combo piece. So you've got encrusted in the middle and poppy on the outside. So it's still all over gold, but it's technically two different designs.
Now, I'm interested, Patrick, because that looks very similar to weeping gold in the two-tone metals. So what is the difference between those?
The biggest difference between a weeping gold, and I actually have an example I'll show you, because I don't, to be perfectly honest, I'm probably going to be selling the weeping gold piece because I'm running out of room and it's not my favorite, but I will be able to show it. And this is a good example to show that. So you can see that this has a high gloss portion and then a duller portion that is indicating how the etch was done. And this is something we've talked about. You talked about it with Fostoria. I talked about it with Cambridge. The technique is similar, and it's a technique that I don't understand all of the steps, but it gives you a uniform, smooth surface. You know, you might be able to feel a little bit of roughness versus the polished area, but for the most part, when you rub across this, it is completely smooth. When you get into weeping gold, and this is a very large example of it, when you get into weeping gold, you also have high gloss and then the burnished area. However, and I'm hoping the light is going to show this, if you look kind of on the edge, you can see there's dimensionality to this. So the high gloss surface is almost like it's dripped over the unglossed burnish, the more burnished gold. And when you run your finger across it, you can actually feel it go from a high point to a low point and then back up to a high point. So the weeping gold, it's still going to have an all over pattern. This one is very uniform. It's not always this uniform, but it's always going to be uniform. But when you then go to feel it, you're actually going to feel a texture change as you go across it. And it's the two-tone is the easiest giveaway, but that feel is like if you're in person. If you're doing it online, it might be a little bit harder. But again, if you look at them side by side, you can just even tell the way this light is hitting.
Very different.
It's just refracting differently because you effectively are at different levels of surface. Here, yeah, you can see what's shiny and you can see what's dull, but it's very uniform. So that is the biggest difference. A lot of people made weeping gold. Weeping gold is much later. Weeping gold, from my understanding, and I could be wrong on that because I do not collect weeping gold. My understanding, weeping gold was really more popular in the 50s, and it kind of replaced the all over gold. And weeping gold from when I do research, and when I look to buy things, if I'm buying them, I don't ever see weeping gold referred to as AOG. It is all over gold, but that doesn't seem to be the term that gets applied to this. This appears to always get referred to as weeping gold, where when you're getting into these types of etches, that's when you're dealing with AOG. That's the all over gold.
Well, it really does look like on that piece that the gold is almost melting down the side versus having that really nice dimensionality and texture with the other piece.
And, you know, even though like planets was still a little, there were a couple of the designs. I can show you a couple of the other patterns. There are some etches that are a little bit more amorphous, but when you get into, let's find one. Like this one is called Dot and Star. You know, it still has a pattern. Like this is still all over gold, and you would still have that pattern. There's one other one. I seem to have lost it. There's one that had a little bit more. I think I showed it to you before. It was the one that had the wavy lines. Yeah, that one. The silk moire. You know, to a certain extent, that could kind of like, oh, well, that's kind of like silk moire. Yeah, no. You know, it's this really is, even though it's very uniform, it's very, like you said, it's weeping. It's like it's dripping. It's like it's pouring itself down. Yeah, it's crying. And so this more, you know, wavy version is still very distinct. You know, it's like it's got a very specific pattern. So I don't think people, once you know, and that's why I'm kind of talking about this, once you know the differences, whether you're collecting it for yourself, or I know a lot of people that watch these shows are resellers, or, you know, they're doing stuff vintage on their own, is just knowing some of the terminology, knowing what to use on your eBay listings. If you use the abbreviation of AOG, yeah, there's probably going to be over half the people that will stumble across it won't know what that is. But if you're trying to find the right buyer, somebody's going to know what that is, and they're going to find it. And if you can do the research on things like those etches, I'm on the lookout for that planets etch. So if I can find planets AOG, I'm also going to know, you know what you have, which means I'm going to pay a lot for it. But, you know, it's like you want to know the right terms, because then you're going to find the right buyers. And if you find the right buyers, they will pay more for it, because they're going to be like, oh yeah, I have all kinds of, you know, in my case, I have all kinds of Picard, Daisy, and Rose. I don't want any more. The only reason I would take another piece of Daisy and Rose into my collection is if it was an older stamp. But I'm already at the point that the stamp can't get much older, because that would then predate when this pattern was, when the whole AOG was created. So it's like I'm kind of closing that window. So now what I want to do, I have no interest in building a wing onto my house to hold this collection. So I've got it like quality over quantity. I want to find a couple of these different, I don't need to find every etch, but some of these etches are really pretty. And some of these pieces are really pretty, and I want to be able to incorporate them. I've got a collection of Austrian porcelain, which I'll probably show at some point. It looks beautiful with this. And so, you know, in some cases, some of the Picard kind of starts looking like that. So I can kind of start merging the edges there.
That planet etch is gorgeous, and there's a lot of Fostoria early etches from the 20s and 30s that feature planets and stars, and they're
really
rare.
Okay.
And
yeah, you don't normally see the geometrics. Yeah, you don't see the geometrics all that often, because it's like people are more used to the florals. And, you know, because again, design wise, this did carry a little bit into the Art Nouveau, you know, the end of Art Nouveau as you moved into Deco. The florals exists. You know, I think I've shown I do want to show the vase collections, because there is a couple of differences. This is a little bit later. This is a later Picard mark. Okay, Bren's asking a question. I would say for this collection, I'd say about half of them came from the wild, and about half of them were eBay purchases during the pandemic. I was bored and I was buying things. Like I think all of us fell into that. Yes, I will say
we all did.
I want to say it was this one. I haven't shown this one yet. It was either this one or the next one. This is a piece of Stouffer. This I actually got from Tim over the years. And he was trying to read the stamp. I want to say it was this one, because the stamp was hard to read. The other one's a little bit easier to read. So I think it was this one. He was saying what it was. He didn't know what it was. He was talking about the RNS Prussia, and he couldn't figure out why there were two date stamps. And I couldn't grab it fast enough. Like, I don't care. Nobody else knew what he was talking about. And I'm sorry. I was being very quiet, uncharacteristically quiet in the chat, because I wasn't telling anybody what this was. it wasn't like it wasn't specifically valuable, but it was a piece of Stouffer. And it's not common. It doesn't come across. It probably comes up a little bit more locally because I am outside Chicago, but Stouffer wasn't around for as long, and it did not distribute as broadly as Picard did. Like Picard actually had a sales team that did circuits across the country on the rail lines, selling to every department store in the country. Stouffer did mail order, and that was about it. So, and they folded right at the beginning of World War II. So their Oliver Gold didn't last as long. So this particular piece kind of got in the same thing. Date wise, this one is from 1920 to 1924 because they changed their stamps a lot. So that red stamp with the cross in the middle of it is it's Mark 10, but it's also an RNS Prussia piece. And then this pattern looks similar to the other one. But you see there's no roses in this one. This is actually considered the Forget-Me-Not etch.
Oh, that's lovely.
Beautiful pierced handles. I mean, this is just a beautiful.
Would that be considered reticulated, Patrick?
Yes, it would. So this is a beautiful piece, and actually, to conserve space, this one sits on my etagere with a piece of my Austrian porcelain in it. It actually is the perfect size to cradle one of my ewers that I've got for my Austrian porcelain. So like double duty. I'm totally using that. And then, so that one I'm pretty
sure. Question coming in.
Yeah.
She's saying, so there's not always a 14 karat gold mark.
No, none of my pieces are marked at all. Like there is no reference of what type of gold it is at all. So that's why I hesitate to say, is it like some of the weeping gold? Actually, let me pull up this weeping one. That one might have said something. Okay, the weeping one does. The weeping one actually says 22 karat gold.
I've seen the weeping gold.
Yeah, weeping gold. I've seen it marked before. I couldn't remember what this one was because I don't like literally this is on the bottom shelf of the etagere waiting to get bumped. So watch for an upcoming live sale. This will probably show up. But it was nice to have. I will be perfectly honest though. Perfectly honest. I actually got this from Tim, and over the years I had him ship the two together. This was on his eBay or Etsy store, and then the other one was at one of his live sales. So I grabbed the Stouffer. And then I'm like, well, I'm going to combine shipping. So I went on to his store and I asked, hey, I buy this too? I did. I'm like Nate when he was talking about his auction. I did not pay attention to the size. I thought I was getting this. So the box showed up and it was massive. I'm like, why is this box so big? I did a video of my opening of it. I actually asked if I was being punked because it was so hard to open. But then this came out. I mean, this is a water pitcher. Like this, again, this isn't my favorite piece to have in my living room, but it does look good against the burgundy. But at that time, my collection was smaller. And so this was like a space filler that now I'm kind of running out of space. So this will get bumped eventually. But this did come from Tim over the years, as well as that one dish. So a piece of weeping gold and a piece of Stouffer.
Now, do people actually use these? Because I know you mentioned several of them were from a wedding service. So I'm surprised that these, if they did get used because of the gold on the outside, I don't know how you properly clean them.
This would have absolutely been used because this has been glazed. Was glazed on the inside with the original white porcelain. This was designed for use. So, and again, back in the eras. Now with the weeping gold pieces, this one is Holly Ross, something like that. I have not done any research on this one. I'm going to assume that this is probably from the 50s. You didn't have if anyone had a dishwasher, it wasn't the industrial strength dishwashers. You're washing this stuff by hand anyway. So in this particular case, I think this would have very much been used as a dinner service. I don't think I actually showed these, but these, salt and pepper shakers, they would have been used.
Oh, I love those.
The plate would have been used. And it's funny because again, patterns got stolen, from each other all the time. Check out that pattern. And now look at
they're almost identical.
It's the same. When I bought this, I assumed it was Picard because this was Picard. And then I am not kidding, 10 minutes before this show started, I had my daughter's young eyes available. And I said, this is one of those that the entire bottom has been painted. So there's no label. There's nothing on here. It might have had a paper label at one point, but there is an artist's signature. Most of my pieces are not signed. I do have a list. The book gives every artist that ever worked for Picard. And this one, see if I can get it to show, you can see it starts with an O. The rest was a question, but it starts with an O. There were no artists that worked for Picard that started with the letter O. So we started doing some digging, trying to figure out, well, what maybe could that be? And it turned out, and I don't know if I marked the page, but there's a company called Osborne, and there's a reference to it in the book, in the Picard China book. And it said that he did not like to put, he did have logos, but you can see this rectangular one there on the edge. That's his signature. That's what's on that mold. It took us a while, but the E on the end, the way that was done, that's the same signature. And there's a reference that said when he did the AOG, he didn't like to put any other labels on there. He just etched his name on the bottom. So it's his signature. So I have a piece of Osborne.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, so I have a piece of Osborne Art Studio piece without even realizing I had a piece of Osborne Art Studio piece. So I don't necessarily want it, but it's a cool piece. It's like what is actually unique about it is there's only one handle on it, and the handle is on this side because the basket there's a bow at the top of the basket. So the handle is actually on the side of the design with the basket. So they were
fascinating, Patrick. Now, do the
because they're all in Chicago, they stole the artists from each other too. So that was the difference too. In some cases, the patterns followed around because the artist was the one that designed it. So like, oh yeah, I know how to do that etch, and they marched over to the next studio and did it themselves.
Well, it's similar to glass manufacturing. You know, some glass makers would start at a lower glass company, and then they might move to Fostoria or something, and really they would produce some of the best glass there. I'm curious about the artist signatures. Do they make those pieces more valuable?
They do. They tend to be in the all over gold. They tend not to be really relevant. But this book again goes into a list. This is what their signatures looked like. And if you've got a piece like that, you damn well want it signed, and the person who did it wanted to sign it. So you can see like this book is decades old, but this one was signed by Shalinor, which is a name. Shalinor actually jumped between a couple different companies. You know, back then this vase was $400 to $550. So that I would say probably retained its value compared to like the Oliver Gold is not super valuable. Things like this are not as valuable because the fashion of those have like worn out. But you're still going to have, if you have one signed versus one not signed, just like any piece of art, you're going to get more out of the signed pieces.
So those are just incredible.
Yeah, I'm just like randomly flipping open, pages. I mean, just check out, even when they did like even the pale with the gold, they just put that beautiful blue, the cornflower in there, the Chinese pheasant, the lemonade pitcher, the cider pitcher. I mean, just some of the designs that they were able to create. The shapes, and this is one of the things that don't get too hung up on the shapes because again, Picard did make their own porcelain, Stouffer did not. So Picard could have created something unique, but in most cases, they were bringing these blanks from Europe, which meant anybody, including like the little old lady living in Kansas City that ordered blanks and was painting porcelain in her parlor, they all could have had the same shape. So that's again why signatures tend to be really key, because if you could chase the signature down, okay, that was an artist that worked for Picard and you could, date it versus that was, Aunt Lucy who, lived in Kansas City and she did it for a hobby. Doesn't mean, it shouldn't make a difference, but the fact of the matter is Aunt Lucy's piece is not going to be as valuable because most likely it's not going to have the detail or the skill level as somebody who was trained to do porcelain painting on a production level.
That makes so much sense, Patrick. And all those shapes, I just can't get over how gorgeous they are. I tend to like the rusty, crusty stuff, but I might have to start a collection of this.
You can have a little. Like,
if I do, I'll blame you.
There you go. This is my oldest piece of Stouffer. This is Mark 9. This is from 1918 to 1922. The oldest piece that I have. And again, it just has a different version of the stamp. This one did not have... Yeah, so this one, there is no other reference to who made the blank. So like this is old enough that maybe they've skated by or somehow, obliterated it. But this is again just an encrusted version. I have either this one. No, I think it's in this one, but I think I've had it in both. This one I think is holding another piece of porcelain, but this bowl is actually holding a collection of I say Bobèche, I don't Bobèche, the little crystal pieces from a chandelier. They sit in this bowl. So you could put a collection of razor blade tins in here and just have a really nice contrast, to just have a really pretty piece that's holding something very industrial. So you have rusty and crusty and gold. So
And why not? That is just a fabulous display. I love all the possibilities you can do with these things because now people are reinventing the nappies and the different servers. You don't need them to be for lemons
absolutely.
and other pieces. I mean, of course, you can use them for that, but I think it's fun that we're becoming more creative with how we save and display the vintage.
So this is my first piece of Austrian porcelain, Stellmacher porcelain, turn of the century. So you can see that's got the oval. It's sitting on the oval tray. The Osborne handled piece. This was my birthday present to myself. This is my most recent Austrian porcelain from around 1920.
That is gorgeous.
Yeah, that's like my favorite piece. The little shell dish. This one right here. You can see the set of 3 vases over here on the edge, just kind of tucked into the corner. And then the little, I can do this. The little eagle came from Sean at Skunky Junk. It's actually a gold flag finial. And I've got that on the base of my theater seat lamp, which I had, taken a little bit farther back. This is the edge of a theater seat that I have turned into an actual stage lamp that I use for task lighting in my living room.
That is the coolest piece, Patrick, I think, in your entire house.
Yeah, so you can combine the rusty and crusty. I mean, you've got the aged paint wear and stuff on the metallic, the industrial. It's got piping, what holds it, like that's just pipe that's made into the base. And it plays very nice along with, there's a lot of patina on the finial and then the gold and the porcelain right alongside of it.
And your red wall, your maroon wall is gorgeous with all of that. I still think that's a stellar look despite what the fashion community might say.
Yep. And then you go to what's behind me. Like I don't have the gold that fits into this. So, I've got my 1920 vertical grand piano. I've got my 19th century salt glaze collection. I'm not putting the Picard over here. Like this is a little bit more rustic, a little bit more raw. And there's nothing like this looks silly sitting next to it. So like at some point, that's all part, it's all about being able to use it. Some people collect for collecting, some people collect to hoard, whatever. But at some point, bring something into your place that has a place for everything and everything in its place. And then in some cases, what I'll end up doing is like that weeping gold, it'll retire. I'm not going to keep trying to find and squeeze things in and make space for it, because at some point it's going to have lived its usefulness. I'll sell it to somebody else who will want it more. We'll use it as a vase or whatever they're going to use it for. And I then replace it with something that I like more or has a better fit within my collection.
And I like that philosophy, Patrick. I think that's a very, very stellar way to collect, because with vintage, you can just get so much in your house. So it's kind of fun to pick pieces that you really want. And I have to do that with oil cans or typewriter tins, particularly typewriter tins, because they made so many of them. I mean, there's literally thousands. If you don't believe me, go to eBay and look at all the different kinds. And then one tin itself may have 5 different versions. And I mean, I can't have them all. I'd have an entire room of typewriter tins. So I have to be more particular about the cans that I want. And so I really focus on the graphics that speak to me most, instead of just collecting all typewriter tins or all oil cans. You do have to do that. And I think the way you've done your displays, Patrick, are just so fantastic, and just getting the quality and being surrounded by things that bring you joy and make you happy. Sometimes like you've put that vase into the bottom of that little piece, like there's really not a specific purpose for it per se, like you're using it every day, but just to be surrounded by something that you enjoy, that makes a big difference in your life.
And in some case, in my opinion, I don't actually have a picture of how we're using these smaller ones, but there's a little ewer that fits very nicely in here, and it's on a glass. That's the etagere is glass. And so what's nice is it actually gives a little bit more presence, because this is now separating the more fragile ewer from the glass shelf. So it just gives it a little bit more substance. That's not what this was designed for, but at a distance, it just gives a nice little like visual break. And there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of different ways to use it. And then what I'll end up doing at some point, the Osborne piece probably will go away. Not because I don't like it. I mean, I like it, but I'm also not in love with it. But at some point I recognize, okay, I picked that up at a really good price. I think that's one I found in the wild. And I didn't know whose it was. I didn't know the pattern. I recognized the daisy and the rose. So I thought it could be Picard, but everyone did daisy and rose. Now that I know that it's not, I'm not going to say it doesn't belong in my collection, but at some point I do like the fact that my collection is Picard and Stouffer. Do I want to also go into Osborne? Well, I got to draw the line somewhere. So as long as the piece is useful, hey, I'll keep it. But if at some point I find a Picard piece or a Stouffer piece, because the other difference is Osborne lasted into the 70s, even though Picard still exists, they were doing this much later. So it's harder to date those types of pieces. And I really like the antique pieces. So if I can find something that would replace this, hey, again, I'll offer this. I'll sell it to somebody who will give it a good home because it's a beautiful piece, it's perfect condition, no chips, no cracks, etc. But I then would have something that, like, now I can say I've got a Picard collection, or I've got a Picard Stouffer collection. So,
which is just fabulous. So I love your research and the history of all these pieces. And one thing that I find so interesting is just the stamps. I am fascinated by stamps and things that you can date. That's one of the reasons that I love depression glass, is because patterns early patterns like Romanesque and you get into Tea Room, Indiana. I mean, those were only made for like 4 years. And I just think that's fascinating. And I love when you can date stuff.
And some of it you can find online, but I think you talked about this once in one of your, in either a duodive or a triptych. I can't remember what you were talking about. In some cases, it's just nice to have the books.
Yes. Absolutely.
And in a lot of cases, the books have the information that this was actually another one I wanted to show. Check out the peacocks.
Oh man!
I mean, just, can you imagine coming across that?
Peacock is stellar.
I mean, it's just amazing. But it's just like European porcelain. They had a series of stamps, and in some cases, some of the stamps only existed for like 1 or 2 years. So suddenly you can be looking for the shape, you can be looking for the design, you can be looking for the all over gold. But what ends up saying, okay, this is why it needs to be in my collection, is because this only existed for a year, or this artist only, worked there for 2 years. And you now have the proof because it's signed, or it's got the stamp. For some reason, I can't find any of the stamps. But you've got the information available, and looking at it here, it's nice because it's one page with all of the stamps that you can then look at a glance and say, yep, that's what it is. Ooh, no, that's not right, because that's red instead of brown. And now I've got to figure out, well, what version is the red one, or what version is the brown one? And I can't.
I've talked about that a lot, but absolutely the books, I just cannot speak highly enough about reference books. And I know that there's this kind of philosophy that maybe they're going out of style, or people don't want all this library of books in their house. I see them all the time in the antique malls for relatively inexpensive, but you just cannot go wrong. Like, look at that page. It's got all of your marks right there.
It's got everything you need, exactly how long they existed, exactly what they looked like. They moved around a few times. So you've got Ravenswood is another name that popped up. This coin was used in 2 different time periods. They're marked like Mark 10. As I mentioned, Edgerton was something they did at the beginning. It's one of those, like, I've never come across these Edgerton ones in the wild because they're from 1898 to 1903. Well, they're going to be harder to come by. So it's one of those cases but if I didn't know they existed, I wouldn't realize that they were out there to find, so it's one of those cases, you don't know what you don't know. And these reference books are fantastic because I wouldn't have known that peacock piece existed. Like I would, if maybe I stumbled across it, but I can't imagine that would even end up on eBay. That's going to be in a Sotheby's auction. Like, that's not going to be on an Etsy store. So it's one of those cases that if you don't know what's out there, you don't even know what you want to collect. And the reference books are just a great way to fill in the gaps on that.
They really are. I mean, and I talked about this maybe in the duo dive we did on my collection of Tobacciana, but there was a lot of tins I did not know existed because they're so rare. I don't know if they were only made for a certain time or just many examples don't exist. So when I went through that book, it was like true eye candy, and I was marking, okay, my holy grail would be this. And then I found that Times Square tin, and I am still on the hunt for it. But that's what's so wonderful about those books is the information. The prices might be kind of outdated, sure,
Right.
but I mean, you just have all the great information at your fingertips. And while online is wonderful, you can't always find everything you need. And when I did the Coca-Cola triptych, I couldn't have done it without that book from Petretti, because there was a lot of examples that just don't exist online. And so being able to photograph from that book and show you all is exactly perfect for that kind of thing. So love the books.
Absolutely. Well, just that planets, you said that they did it in the glass as well. If I didn't know that planets etch existed, I would not have been able to go to eBay, Google, Sotheby's, and Googled planets Picard. Why would those two words ever combine in my lexicon to try and find it if I didn't know it already existed? And so it's the online is fantastic. It's hard to believe how we could do it without it, if not that long ago. But the books are still, it's again, just a great little reference tool. And particularly if you are interested in a very specific topic. And like Auntie Christie just said, like she always gets excited when you find Picard. Picard's just a good quality piece. And so depending on, even if you're not collecting it, it's a good name to come across. But somebody had mentioned it before, they didn't know what those marks, the fact that there was that line through the mark, like what did that necessarily mean? Maybe that was just the label didn't go on right or whatever. No. That means they knew when it was made that it was not the highest quality. Doesn't mean you can't sell it, but when you're then comparing it, somebody who's a collector is going to know, okay, I'll take that for my collection, but you better give me really good pictures because I need to know what made that a second and do I want it in my collection.
So. Yep. And I think knowing that for a reseller or a collector is just so helpful. And those little things are something that we can all tuck away. It's always one thing that I pick up from either the duo dives or the triptych, and I can tuck into my hat. And if I don't remember anything else, I'll remember that. And when I'm out looking, I'm like, oh yeah, that's that. And that's just really cool. So that's kind of the purpose of these. And I hope you guys enjoyed learning a little bit about Picard and Stouffer. It just was so fascinating, Patrick. I learned a lot.
Oh, good. I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to fill much time, but I love showing my collection, and I can talk. And I did want to highlight Tim's comment from Teophane's comment, because less for something like Picard, because you're already in a fairly finite universe. But some of the most popular books out there, which I don't tend to like as much, but like the Depression Glass Guide, which then includes a little bit of everything, that's where Tim's hitting it on the head. Because that's when you can say, exactly. Okay, I didn't know this company existed. This is really cool. Or, oh my God, what is Goofus glass? I never want to see it again. My retinas are now permanently scarred from looking at Goofus glass. If you don't stumble across it, now you at least know how to give a name to what you hate, type idea. Because I 100% believe in what Tim said. It's just as important to know what you don't like than it is to what you do, because sometimes it helps you find what you do based on moving away from what you don't. So
exactly. And that Depression Glass guidebook is a great example, because there are so many patterns in there. I love Warman's, not sponsored, can't speak highly enough about that book. I mean, that is like my Bible for Depression Glass. But you flip through it and there's so many really cool deco patterns, which are the ones I'm most attracted to. And then there's some with like really intricate flowers that are kind of, I hate to use the word derpy looking, but they are, and they're just not my favorite. Nope. Or the Goofus glass, and you're like, why on earth did anyone make that? But yeah, okay, it exists.
What were they thinking?
Yeah, I mean, so it's great. It's wonderful to have those resources, and then to see things like even on the duo dives, there might be shows that you guys attend that you say, okay, that's not really for me, but now you've learned something about it. So if you see it in the wild, at least you know what it is, and I think that's really fantastic.
So and for resellers, sometimes you end up dealing with things that you're not a huge fan of, because you can say, oh, wait, I remember hearing about that and it's valuable. Now I know what it is. Now I've got to decide, well, do I actually want to have it in my collection, or do I want to have it in my store, or do I want to be dealing with it? Yeah. And also it's just as important, like one of my, I think your best talks was on the reproductions of the Coca-Cola stuff, because that's the kind of stuff that, because we buy so much online now, what are the questions to ask? What do you need? Like, just like, okay, it doesn't mean I'm not going to buy something if it has a Picard second on there, but you're darn well going to be contacting that seller saying, excuse me, you have two very crappy pictures. Can you give me better quality? Because what you're selling is a second. Doesn't mean it doesn't have any value, but now it's like a little subtle warning sign that's like, okay, this is already not perfect condition. I need to find out why. Because if it was, and I will also say, at least in the case of Picard, and I believe also Hager, they would never sell something that was damaged. What typically it meant is that the glaze was not it was not at the highest quality. So like I've seen a lot of Hager seconds that have had that label removed, but I've seen a lot of Hager seconds that when you look at it, like in a raking light, it's not a uniform smoothness across the edge. So like it would be perfectly fine if you're buying it at a discount to like, oh, that'll be really pretty sitting up on a bookshelf, or maybe high on a bookshelf where no one can see it. That's totally fine. But when people then take the stickers off and try and sell it as firsts, no, so you need to know what to watch for. And that's what all these triptychs, in my opinion, that's what I like about the triptychs and the duo dies. What we're trying to do is in some cases, people aren't going to care. Maybe you never want to see a piece of all over gold ever. But if you do, you're going to pay, it's basically to a certain extent, you're now going to look at something like this and like, oh, wow, there's a pattern in there. You're not going to just
pay
look
attention
at it
to it.
and like, it's just all gold, because again, you might see something that it just doesn't have a pattern, but now there's a difference. And then you can start figuring out with companies, is there a difference in that? It's all about information, and knowledge is power. And how you use it is completely up to you.
And it's true, Patrick. I mean, I was just looking at an eBay listing today for a record, and the person took one photo of the front cover, and they were trying to pass it off as a first pressing. And there's a lot of reissues of this particular record, because the one I was looking for is Laverne Baker. And any of Laverne Baker's stuff, for the most part, is pretty rare. I mean, you're going to pay through the nose for her. But sometimes you can get lucky and catch an auction on eBay where the person doesn't know what they have. And you always want to look for Laverne Baker on the Silver Atlantic label for her earlier stuff. And I saw this listing and I was like, $25. Now that's really cheap. Something's fishy. So I started looking. One picture, I was really suspicious. And then I messaged the seller and said, hey, can you send me a picture of the label? Sure enough, it was a colored label. That was the reissue from Japan in like 1980. And the lady was trying to, maybe she didn't know, but also I find it fishy. If you don't take multiple pictures, there's a reason why. And are you trying to pass it off for people like me that think, oh, I might get a good deal, and then it turns out to be a reissue, which we don't want. So
when you go out of your way to say it's a first pressing, you are trying to defraud somebody. If I were to sell, hello, anyone who watches my live sales, I will sell a record because the picture on the cover is pretty. Like, I have no idea what I'm selling, because I have to ask Katie. And if it's a good deal, it's great. I'm going to sell it because of the art. I'm not telling you it's a first pressing. So if I'm telling somebody it's something and then you prove that it's not, then it's all about, well, then how does the seller react? Because I know you shared some experiences where you've tried to, even when you purchased something that wasn't what it was said to be, having a fight with the seller to try and get your money back. Sometimes it's innocent, and there is you sometimes need to understand that, yes, but you can usually tell, in my opinion, you can tell if somebody was just like, hey, I'm clearing out my parents' estate. I'm just putting all the stuff on eBay and I have no idea. That's where you can get some good deals. I do want to highlight though what Jan is saying too, because at no point am I denigrating anyone for liking anything. I like some really weird stuff. And so Goofus Glass, I will say, for as much as that I don't particularly care for Goofus Glass as a look, I mean, it's got gold and burgundy, so I should love it. But 99% of the Goofus Glass I see is in such poor condition that it's unattractive. But with that said, the 1% of the time I come across a piece of Goofus Glass that's in pristine condition, I will sit there and analyze it and try and figure out if it was repainted, because in most cases, that's actually what it was done. But then it's like, okay, I could see where maybe at some point this was attractive and that this would still be. So it takes all different strokes for different folks. It's at some point we're all going to like something different. So no one take any offense, nor feel like you have to defend yourself that you like something. So I know we were all joking, but Jan, I'm glad you said that, because we're all going to find different things, and that's how you can then also find some good deals, because you're going to find a seller, you're going to find a live sale, you're going to find somebody at a garage sale. Particularly when you're dealing with closeouts of parents' estates, like, oh my God, I grew up with this stuff. I hated it so much.
I just want to get rid of it.
Give me a buck. I have a 1972 needle point in an absolutely gorgeous frame that I got for $1 at a garage sale. And I think it was marked 10. And I picked it up to see what it was. And on the back, the person who made it was, she put her name on it. It was dated 1972. I literally just picked it up, and she's like, you know what? Give me a buck for it. I just want to get rid of that. It's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. It was hung in my mom's house for like her entire life. And the minute she died, I just wanted to throw it away. Okay. Wow. Here's a buck. So it's been on stage in theater productions with me. And it currently sits at actually right above the etagere, because it looks great against the burgundy wall, but to her, she thought it was useless. She's like, who would want a 1970s needlepoint in a gaudy frame? I'm like, this frame is probably worth a couple $100, so I'm good. I'll pay you $1. So yeah, everyone's gonna like something different. And again, that's why Nate and Katie and I have talked about like which triptychs are more popular, which duodies are more popular. There are gonna be some that are more popular and some that are less, but it doesn't mean that none of them are valuable. That we shouldn't have done a certain one. There are going to be topics that people really respond to and some that they don't. And, we're just here to make the references. And again, like you just said about your book, I'm not sponsored by this guy. I don't even know what the guy's name is. Alan B. Reed, produced by Collector Books. I will say, also not sponsored by them, but Katie's talked about it before, but I got this in the same place. Thrift Books.
Oh, I love them.
It's just mother's milk. It's just, you could lose hours on thrift books. I really couldn't tell you exactly what I paid for this, but I don't think I've ever paid more than $5 for any of the reference books that I picked up for myself. So, some of them are expensive, some of them are expensive because they're rare. They didn't print that many, and it's a popular enough subject. Yeah. Picard, not exactly a barn burner. So, I think there were multiple versions of it. And, the one I got, the spine's a little damaged, but for whatever, $3, $4, or $5 that I paid for it, it's a great reference. And again, it says something. I've got a book from Cabinet and Camera that I picked up. That sits on my bedstand, and I just read it every night because there's always something in there that's beautiful, and I love looking at it. Also, not sponsored by me, or does not sponsor me, but books are great. And I just love flipping the pages as opposed to scrolling down my phone.
Yeah. It's that physical aspect that's so nice, to hold a book, to see things in color, to have all the information right there. And I love thrift books. All of my books have been $5 to $6. Now, I did pay up. I talked about this when I was doing some glass research, but my Fostoria book, that one is no longer in print. So it is worth considerable money, but it is, if you collect Fostoria, that is like the Bible Holy Grail book by Hazel Marie Weatherman. And I highly recommend picking that up if you can get it at a good price, because I just rely on that so much. It's fabulous. But love thrift books anytime you can get good books. And even in antique stores lately, I've been hitting the jackpot at antique stores where dealers have either been closing their booths or they've been getting out of the antique game, and they just have all these books for $2, $3. And I picked up a bunch recently. In fact, there was one I regret not getting on Hayward Wakefield Furniture. And I know that book's out of print, and several people were looking for it. And it was only like $10, and I should have gotten it. I may go back, because that's been in my head for a couple of days now about that book, because the images are just so amazing.
Well, and it's hard because, like you said, antique shops, you're already doing so much other, you don't necessarily want to stop and look through them. But I just posted a video yesterday at an antique shop that I went to, and I already had spent more time than I wanted. And I was going to check out, and there was a bookshelf right next to the checkout. All of their reference books were $5. And
Wow.
I'm just like, why didn't I see this earlier? It sounds like I want to go back just to sit there and flip through them and say, like, okay, maybe there's a company that I'd have not heard of, but like just flipping through the page, like, oh wow, this is actually really pretty, or this is something, or oh, this would look great with my Austrian porcelain, whatever. In some cases, you don't know what you don't know, and it's a lot easier to stumble across it in an antique shop than trying to Google your life away and find something online.
Yeah, especially when you read reviews on reference books, because I've been finding that there's different opinions, and especially on Amazon. If you read some of the reviews for reference books, especially on oil cans, there are people that are like, well, these are only the quart oil cans, so I don't like this book. It's terrible. And then other people are like, oh no, but they have rare quart oil cans that the gallon oil can book doesn't have. I'm like, okay, well then which one should I buy? Should I just buy both? Because obviously there seems to be a discrepancy on which one is better, and people have their opinion. So it's fun when you're actually there and you can flip through it and say,
And
oh wow, this is
editions can be
helpful.
difficult. Like
Oh yeah.
there's three editions to I have a collection of flower frogs, and there's three editions to the glass flower frogs books, and each one covers something slightly different. So it's like it's not like just if you get the third one, you're going to get everything that was in books 1 and 2. No, you still might need to go pick up books 1 and 2. There's going to be some overlap, but you're going to find like, oh, that was the one that included toothpick holders, or that was the one that included, whatever. And it's, but at some point I only have so much space, one of the things I wanted to just say, cause I didn't know this, Melinda's saying that Ruby Lane, I don't spend a lot of time on Ruby Lane, but saying that
I
they
don't
don't
either.
collector's books either, or they collect collector books too. So that's actually interesting. I didn't realize that. I see them as a higher priced, higher quality, so higher value.
More for decorators.
I wouldn't even thought that they would have had collector's books. So that's actually good to know.
That is very good to know. Yeah, and I saw someone talking about the Viking glass book, and I know everyone in our community is now on the lookout for that. That's an expensive book. It's out of print, and I did see one on thrift books, and that's where there's definitely differences. This one was listed for like $150 to $200 versus the normal $5 books that I like to gravitate towards too. But very fun. Well, Patrick, this has been a wonderful chat, a great deep dive, a duo dive rather, into Picard and Stouffer. I hope you guys learned something. Lots of you guys have been commenting, and I'm so glad you all tuned in for this. Share this with your friends and any of your reseller buddies and collectors to learn a little bit more about this. And maybe next time you're out in the wild and you see this, you'll now know the differences, thanks to Patrick's wonderful research and information.
And that always happens. We do a duo dive, we do a triptych, and the next time I go to a shop, I'm like, oh, look, I can apply what I learned. So hopefully it'll happen to you guys too.
Yes, I hope so. You did that with the oil cans, and Patrick found oil cans and tobacco tins all in one place right after our videos. So guys, I hope you have a very happy Thanksgiving, and I hope you enjoyed this. Patrick, thanks so much for coming on and being a part of this. I really enjoy these shows. There's always so much to learn.
I always enjoy doing it with you. So thanks so much for hosting and for helping me walk through my collection.
Absolutely. So as always, folks, I hope that you will stay in, stay tuned, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Binge YouTube. Bye-bye now.
Bye, everybody.